In this short video presentation, I'd like to talk about types of dialect variation. One type of dialect variation is lexical variation. For example, Canadians sometimes use the word Chesterfield to mean sofa or couch. That would be an example of lexical variation. Loan words sometimes enter into a dialect from another language spoken in the area. For example, a word from Nigerian might enter into Nigerian English. And my pronunciation may be terrible here, but I'm going to try. Babaniga is a long dress worn by men, or agbada, another long dress worn by men. These words are used in Nigerian English. Do we have any problem considering these words to then be English? You can see how these loan words might become necessary in that specific dialect of English. A culturally relevant phenomena that hasn't necessarily become extensively a part of the English language. Another way in which the lexicon may come to vary in different dialects would be coinages. And these are words not borrowed from a local language, but new words coined to cover local phenomena and situations. Again, an example from Nigerian English. A bintu is a person who's returned from overseas, as in they've been to somewhere else. Another example might be Ghana must go. This is a bribe, and it's a new coinage entered into Nigerian English. Finally, an English word might have its meaning extended or restricted in another dialect. And using examples from Nigerian English again, long legs is a word for nepotism. I've heard in Korea, I've heard people when speaking English talking about parachuting to describe a situation in which an opportunity is given to somebody to parachute into the top floors of a company because of family connections. So again, nepotism. They parachute into a job much higher than they could have earned otherwise. Another way in which dialects vary is phonologically, so phonological variation. I've mentioned at different points the Canadian raising. Americans, when doing a Canadian accent, saying that we say boot and a boot instead of out and about. Other phonological variation, when I've been to the States, my American friends have sometimes said that they say again and I say again. I've looked in the dictionary and both are acceptable. They're only familiar with one. So this would be an example of phonological variation. Another type of dialect variation is morphosyntactic variation. A friend of mine was marking exams in Ontario, the EQAO, the Educational Quality Assessment of Ontario, I think it stands for. And as they opened one box of these literature exams, she began to notice that more and more students were using U's, Y-O-U-S, as a plural form of you, as opposed to you for singular and you for plural. They were using you and U's. She checked out where the box came from and found that, sure enough, this set of exams had come from one specific region. So in that particular region, U's would be an example possibly of morphosyntactic variation. Another example we've mentioned before, I think, is the use of they as a gender-neutral singular, as in every child must bring their own lunch, as opposed to every child must bring his or her own lunch. When I was an undergraduate, everybody I knew would have used they in this way, and this was a political choice, but it would also be an example of the way our dialect varied. In some dialects, adjectives often are substituted for adverbs, so one might drive slow and eat healthy, as opposed to drive slowly and eat healthily. These would all be examples of morphosyntactic variation. Another type of variation would be pragmatic variation, and Canadian politeness is an often pointed out example of this. My American friends say that Canadians say sorry an awful lot. They also make fun of the way I pronounce sorry. Nigerian politeness when speaking Nigerian English. Uh, a Nigerian English speaker might say sorry instead of what a shame, or they might add sir where we wouldn't, so professor sir, teacher sir. I noticed in Korea as well that students would refer to teachers not by their names, even by Mr. So-and-so, but teacher, she, or sansang nim. And this would be an example of pragmatic variation when Koreans are speaking English. They would refer to me as teacher as opposed to Mr. Gulliver. So, once again, these different types of dialect variation are lexical variation, phonological variation, morphosyntactic variation, and pragmatic variation.